This week on Quality Digest Live, we speak with Lisa Greenleaf of Rheinland about transportation security.
Plus, to target or not to target? That is the question when we come back.
Today's sponsor of Quality Digest Live is Hexagon Metrology. Hexagon carries the widest range of quality brands. With an extensive support network, Hexagon is also your partner. Hexagon Metrology. We are metrology.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for May 4th, 2012. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm Quality Digest publisher Mike Richmond. All right, our top news story this week comes from Gallup, the well-known surveying and professional services firm. Gallup recently released an overview of the 5 core components for organizations that consistently acquire and develop people of talent. This relentless and intentional focus on talent sets these organizations apart and is a true competitive advantage. So, what are these 5 core components? First, having a workable succession plan, very important. Dirk, of course, succession plans.
Sure.
Need to make sure that you know who's replacing whom if they leave or retire or whatever.
Hit by a bus, the proverbial hit by a bus,
happens all the time. So you need to understand what happens and what you put into place when that does happen. 2, regularly auditing your talent pool, understanding, and this goes these all kind of go hand in hand, but understanding who the people are that are in your organization, what their skills are, what they can do, and what they would do maybe in a new role. That's very important. 3, raising the bar on recruitment. Again, very key issue here where you don't want to settle. You don't want to go into an organization and say, well, we're going to take who applies for a job. You're going to be very selective in who you bring in because those are your future managers, right, down the line. 4, providing breakthrough experiences to help managers grow. Very, very key issue. You need to help your managers do different things, take on different responsibilities, not get set in their roles. So in other words, again, you want to make sure that they're prepared to do other things and help your organization grow. And finally, regular ongoing development of the talent that you have. In other words, give them the opportunity to get extra training, to go out and get in the field and meet people and go to seminars and trade shows, all that type of thing. It's very important to kind of mix it up that way. Now, in many cases, the difference between the company that succeeds and the one that fails is simply that the winning company does a better job of developing their inherent advantages and resources. And human resources, of course, are prevalent among these. As the Gallup piece reveals, organizations with an emphasis on improving their quality would do well to first look within at their own internal processes in developing the people, the managers, that can take them to a higher level of success both in the short and the long term. This article provides some great food for thought along those lines, so to learn more, click on the story link right there.
Great story,
Yep.
But it really does pose all that stuff is right, and I think most people understand that it does pose a problem in today's lean economic times when most companies have really cut back, and you have the expert in this because you can't afford another expert. You can't afford to train somebody else. You've got an expert in that. You've got an expert in this other thing, and you have all these individual people that are really good at what they do. And you don't have time to train somebody else because you're just running so lean that even though this is good stuff, I think sometimes it's really hard to accomplish.
The counter to that is because it's so lean, you need to counter-train
right.
people. You need to have people cross-trained and ability to step into other roles. So your point is well taken. There's also another side of it as well.
Yeah.
So, but good, interesting. But read the article because it's a long article, but there's a lot of really good content in there. So check that out.
Actually, related story here. If your goal is to empower every employee at every level and to express his or her virtuosity in a way that is aligned with company strategy, or if you seek to create innovative products and services that meet challenging customer requirements, actually, we got a book for you.
Right there.
It's called The Value-Driven Process Management by Peter Franz and Matthias Kirchmer, recently released by McGraw-Hill. Franz and Kirchmer are a team of business process management, BPM experts, from the global management consulting company Accenture. And in this book, they explain how to launch value-driven BPM in concert with your existing BPM efforts at your company. And they describe some common roadblocks and clear steps for overcoming those roadblocks. So, according to the authors, of course, this book will help you to achieve immediate business benefits while building lasting BPM capabilities. put the right team and infrastructure in place to build an organization that's designed for an outcome and value-based BPM capability. And finally, assess and prioritize process management improvements that are in alignment with your overall business strategy. And that's a key thing. And that's kind of what the book talks about is, in a nutshell, if you want to harness the inherent skill sets that all of your employees have and to focus those skills in a way that forwards your company's goals, you might want to read this book, Value-Driven Business Process Management by Franz and Matthias Kirchmer. So it really ties in with all of this, is we have a lot of skills. Your people have a lot of skills and skill sets. Are you utilizing them in the way that best forwards the needs of the company? I mean, using great skills in the wrong way doesn't do you any good.
No, it can be counterproductive.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So great book, yes, and we're going to be attempting to continue to bring you books going forward that we think are interesting that we'd like you to read.
Oh, by the way, actually, that was one thing I was going to suggest, is if you run across a book, if you've read a book that you felt was really useful for yourself, for your company, share it with us. Send us an email at qdl@qualitydigest.com, and we'll take a look at the book, get it on the show.
Yep, absolutely. Great. Well, thanks, Dirk.
Sure.
Good stuff. Okay, well, we're going to move on now to our feature articles for the week, and the first one was Securing Goods in Transport with TAPA Certification, which was written by Lisa Greenleaf, and that appeared in Tuesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Okay, as we learned in this article, the vulnerability of truck freight is a huge problem, and definitely from a financial perspective, and potentially as it relates to national security. Now, estimates of annualized financial loss from trucking freight range from $500 million and up. Even worse, the FBI has expressed concerns that proceeds from this type of criminal activity might be used to fund terrorist activity. So very, very concerning. Now, TAPA stands for the Transported Asset Protection Association. It's an international group formed from a variety of stakeholders, all of whom have a common goal: to safeguard the security of shipments. So this is clearly a very important issue for anyone who is affected, who relies on transportation and the supply chain, which is essentially everyone, all of us out there in here. And so to take a deeper look at the issue, we're joined now by the author of the article, Lisa Greenleaf of Rheinland. Lisa, are you with us?
I am. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing awesome for a Friday afternoon.
Hey, it's Friday afternoon. How bad can it be?
It's Friday. Good stuff. Well, thank you for joining us again. And your article was really very interesting. We read it and we appreciated it because I think it shines some light on an issue that maybe a lot of us aren't aware of in the manufacturing space: the importance and the fragility in some cases of transportation. So let me start off by just framing it for you. I gave a little frame, but maybe you can frame it at a little deeper level for me. What exactly is TAPA, and what was it designed, what was it created to do?
Okay, so let me give a little bit of a history of it. Back in 1997, several of the high-tech companies like Intel, Hewlett-Packard, Compaq, basically decided, even though they're competitors, they were all suffering similar losses of thefts in warehouses and basically high-tech product being stolen, and they were just frustrated by it and decided to pool their resources, and they started this group called TAPA. So it dates back to 1997 when it first formed. It was about 37 members strong. It's now, as of 2011, 700 members, and it involves high-tech folks as well as people who insure the high-tech companies, pharmaceutical companies, transporting companies, and everything kind of in between.
So now, so TAPA. Now, how does one? Well, first of all, maybe you can explain to us the kind of the role of the registration in this. I mean, can you get certified to TAPA? Are there other standards within that TAPA oversees? What exactly do you get certified to when you get certified to TAPA?
So the TAPA organization has published a couple of standards. There's the FSR, which is Freight Security Requirements, and then there's the TSR, which is the Trucking Security Requirements. And I guess, since we're talking to an audience related to quality, you can probably identify with the idea that you can't inspect quality in at the end of the line. In the same kind of concept, you can't be thinking about security when your truck is pulling away from the dock. You have to really have built an infrastructure and system to ensure that your goods are protected when they leave your dock and that they're protected while they're in transit to where they're going. So the the TSR standard is intended to help a company develop a system so that they can put the right things in place to protect their product as it's being shipped, and trucking companies and how they handle that. And then the FSR is intended to, again, set down the infrastructure that a company can use to really put together a solid infrastructure to ensure that product as it's being shipped through the pipeline is being protected and taken care of.
So Lisa, are there measurable benefits to TAPA certification?
It basically kind of sets the baseline so that first of all, if you're buying the commodity of having a shipping company ship for you, or you're trying to decide between logistical warehouses or where to store your product, it gives you a certain level of confidence that you would know right away what to expect. Kind of like when you decide to work with an ISO certified company or not. The idea is that over time you will certainly save money because you now have an infrastructure so that your goods are protected in ways that you may not have thought about, or maintain the tension in your system to ensure continue. And as the losses go down, the theory is that your insurance premiums would go down and things like that. So there's certainly some continuity, and stakeholders are all aware of the security requirements throughout the process.
Lisa, let me turn back to FSR versus TSR for a minute. So an organization has a choice, I suppose, or maybe both, where they can either register to either element of this. It would be either FSR or TSR, depending, I imagine, on what their unique needs are within transportation.
Exactly. So it really depends on what their function is. You might have a trucking company who also has a warehouse. So they may want to certify their trucks as well as their warehouse and logistics operation. Basically, it really depends on what is the company doing and their role in the transported goods function. So if they're a trucking company, they would pursue TSR certification, and if they are a logistics company or a warehouse company, then they probably would be looking at FSR, which is the freight security.
Gotcha. And your organization or other registrars would then would work within either the FSR or the TSR, and would register them to the standard and then audit them, I would imagine, for compliance to the standard as well.
Exactly. With FSR, there is a checklist that you go through, and there's different levels of security. So there's like a level 1, level 2. There's actually 2 different levels of security that you can certify to, level A and level B, but within each requirement, you get a score of either 0, 1, or 2. So, for example, one of the requirements is that you have a fence around the property that fully encloses the property. If you have a fence, and it's just, there's nothing specific about the fence, you get 1 point. If you have a fence and it meets certain criteria, like it's over 6 feet high, you have records where you're routinely inspecting it, things like that, you would score 2 points. And so it's really a black and white scoring matrix with a list of requirements. I can't think of I want to say 9 pages or so is the checklist long. And so we would do an audit. We would come on site as a registrar certification body and conduct an audit of your system and your process. And then the same thing with TSR. It's a little different. There's not scoring. You either have it or you don't. And in the same idea, there's a checklist. We go through those requirements. We confirm that they're in place. And then we issue the certificate. And it's issued in conjunction between us and TAPA. So it has both logos on it.
So, Lisa, we're coming to the end of our segment here. One last question I wanted to ask you. Have there been various versions of these standards that have developed over the course of the 10, 15 years in which TAPA has been around? Or is there an update on the standard that may be expected here in the near future?
That's a great question. Actually, there has been updates over the years. The first versions that were certifiable came out in 2008. And then the FSR was released in 2011, and the TSR was just recently released in 2012. Prior to 2012, the TSR was actually not something that a company could get certified to. It gave them something that they could use to kind of build their own infrastructure. But now it's actually sounds funny, certifiable document, as is FSR. And so I would imagine as the standards are applied and companies are audited and we feed back information to the TAPA organization, they have a standards committee that will take that kind of input and use that to shape the next generation standards that they publish.
And actually, Lisa, one more question. Sure. One quick one. Who is requiring registration? I mean, are customers of the freight companies kind of driving this? I mean, who wants to see this registration?
Certainly, companies who are shipping product are going to want to work with trucking companies that are TAPA certified, okay, as well as working with logistic organizations with companies that are TAPA certified, and insurance companies. Certainly, as companies are getting insurance for their goods as they're shipping, this is something that a company could leverage in the negotiations of their insurance premiums and so forth.
Okay, terrific.
Great. Well, thanks, Lisa. That's going to do it for this segment. We really appreciate you joining us today and talking about TAPA. It's something that I think we all, again, need to be aware of, sure, and we really appreciate you shedding a little light on the subject for us. We'll look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Interesting topic.
Good stuff.
It's something we haven't really dealt with before, but and actually, strangely enough, we're going to have another shipping-related thing coming up here for our Tech Corner. So just a little tease for that. Doesn't have anything to do with security, but it does have to do with the quality of your shipments.
Of your shipments, yeah. So that's good stuff. All right. Okay. So you have an interesting article that you wanted to cover this week.
Yeah, one of our frequent columnists, Trip Babbitt, submitted an interesting article this week. And to be honest, I'm a little amazed that he didn't get any comments on it yet, because it definitely, at least in my mind, kind of flies in the face of logic. So let me quote 3 paragraphs just to kind of set this up. I'm just going to quote these just directly from the story. So the first thing is he started off with, long ago, W. Edwards Deming warned us about the use of what he, Deming, called arbitrary numerical goals. Targets are another name for these. They are so commonplace that governments, service, and manufacturing organizations all use them. Targets have become accepted in all organizations, but this habitual use conceals the harm they actually do. So, okay, I get it. Setting arbitrary goals, bad. Okay. Further on in the article, he says, later, focusing the idea a bit further, when targets are set in any part of the organization, they become the de facto purpose of the organization, meaning workers, managers, executives are focused on meeting the target and not the customer. A lack of focus on the customer and forgetting why the customer choose to deal with your organization leads to waste. But when you ignore the customer in favor of targets, the loss is massive. And finally, and I want to switch over to a slide here because this is kind of his argument, his whole argument. Finally, he says, some argue that targets set a direction, but isn't it enough to know that we want sales to go up and costs down? In other words, kind of a general target. What we need to concern ourselves with is the method, not the target. This is where, in my mind, there's a lot of smoke and kind of mirrors going on, because in my mind, I'm kind of disagreeing with what he's saying. You need targets. We all have targets. Arbitrary targets, and that is actually what, was it Duran or Deming? Deming said, he didn't say targets, he said arbitrary targets. Let's cut waste by 50%, and you just pull that number out of your arse, right? I mean, it's like, where'd you get the 50%? Why not 75%? Why not 10%?
Yeah.
Not arbitrary targets.
I think,
but Tripp says targets.
Yeah.
I'm going, you got to have targets.
Well, yeah, I think that there's a little bit of conflation going on here. I think Tripp somewhat conflated the idea of arbitrary targets with targets, as you mentioned there. If you're in a data-driven organization, and you know what your statistics are, what your waste is, or how many defects per whatever you're producing. Sure, targets I think can make some sense, because you can then have a baseline that you truly understand what you're doing. You can say, well, we can, with these changes, cut that by a certain percentage, and we can improve our revenues perhaps by a certain percentage. The problem comes, I think, from companies that are not data-driven or think they're data-driven and truly aren't, where you say where they're kind of pulling it out of there, right? And they're saying, well, I think we need to cut our waste by 50%. That's going to improve our bottom line. Well, how do you know? If you're not data-driven, how do you really know that that is a legitimate target, or you're just pulling it out of thin air. That's where I think what Tripp is saying is he's referring to those companies, and not the first.
I thought that, except maybe we can get another. I think we're zoomed in enough we can see this. He's got another thing he says. Some choose targets based on such nonsense as SMART. That's an acronym, which stands for specific.
Yep.
That's good.
Yep.
Measurable, got to be measured. Attainable, got to be attainable. 50%, just random 50%, may not make sense. 25% makes sense.
Right.
Realistic and timely. This approach for setting objectives seems reasonable, but tells us little about the right measures are for an organization. However, they are still arbitrary. I'm going, what? What's he saying?
I know what you're saying. It's a little confusing what he's talking about. But I think what he's saying ultimately is that most people lump in targets with this idea that, again, you're going to just throw it up against the wall and see what works and kind of try to improve, try to get to that number, as opposed to, which I think we can all agree with, as opposed to doing the true work, which is peeling back the layers of your process and saying, okay,
understand what it's capable of doing.
Yes.
Right.
Understand the capability of the process and improve that. Not so much thinking about, again, an arbitrary target or an arbitrary numerical goal, as Deming would refer to it. Deming also referred to sloganeering, and I think that SMART would fall into this thing about slogans, and SMART. Hey, it's smart. It's
smart.
A cute little term.
Now we got this great acronym. Let's see what the letters can mean.
Yeah, right. What can we? Exactly right. Yeah.
We should call it SMART and then just figure out something that works. Yeah.
That's dumb. Okay. No, but I think that. There's a bigger issue here, actually, that we talked about. It's this idea that, Deming said it, so it's true, right? I mean, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But the bottom line is, even assuming that what Deming said is the gospel, there's a lot of ways to interpret that. I think that you could interpret it the way that Tripp interprets it, that all targets are not to be used. Or you could narrow it and say, the arbitrary targets, exactly what we're talking about.
And I think maybe just to give Tripp the benefit of the doubt, he's probably resorting to a little hyperbole, and this is election year, so we're all used to that. Is even if the targets are reasonable, focusing on the target is the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Even if the target is completely reasonable and you've got a target and it's backed up by whatever data you're going to back it up with, it still all boils down to the process. You still have to look at your process, see what your process is capable of doing, see where you can improve the process. It always comes back to the methodology, the process. And in Tripp's case, because he's a systems guy, it all comes down to improving the system. And then the target is going to do what it's going to do.
And that's a really good point, because if you really truly approach it from that perspective and you improve your system, you may find that the 35% goal that you set really should be more like 20%, but hey, 20% is still really darn good.
Sure.
And if you feel like you failed because you didn't hit the 35 because you got to the 20, you're letting good be the enemy of great, or great be the enemy of good, as the case may be. Then you're really not doing justice to all the effort that goes into really truly unspooling a process and looking at it from a systems perspective. So I think there's good arguments on both sides of this case. I understand what you're saying. I understand what Tripp is saying, I think. And hey, the bottom line always is we want to improve.
Right.
How do we go about it? That's what we're talking about here, and how do you do it best?
Okay,
interesting stuff.
Interesting.
It's good stuff. Okay. Also interesting, because we're going to get back now a little bit to transport and the idea of how do you know if something you've shipped has been shocked.
There we go, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Today's product, and I'll show you a wide-angle view of it, we'll get closer later, is a product called the G-View from ShockWatch. It's the little red thing you see in the metal in the middle of this black piece of metal. The ShockWatch G-View is actually this red thing. The purpose for it is one of the problems that we have when you ship delicate instruments. Let's say we ship something from here, like our video broadcast equipment, which we ship to remote sites. It gets there and maybe it's broken. Well, was it damaged when it was picked up at our loading dock? Was it damaged in transit when we ship via FedEx or UPS or DHL or a regular freight company? Was it damaged when it arrived at the other end? You don't know. All you know it was damaged. Shock labels will tell you that it was shocked, but they don't tell you when and where. This, the ShockWatch G-View, and now we can go over to our, let me pop it under the camera here. The ShockWatch G-View does just that. This little device right here has an impact sensor in it that works in both X, Y, and Z axes. It also has a temperature sensor. And you can program this for limits so that if those limits are exceeded, then it will produce a timestamp, a date and time that is stored along with the temperature and the shock that experience that went beyond the limits. Now, we wanted to test this out. So, Daniel, if you can run a little B-roll here. A little video. We were in recently at Hexagon Metrology in Rhode Island. Just happens to be where ShockWatch is located. And so we said, hey guys, come out, install one of these things. We want to try it in our equipment and see how this puppy actually works. So you see I have it right there in my hand. First thing we needed to do is come up with a way to mount it inside our equipment. So we just came up with this little 19-inch fill panel, and we simply mounted the G-View into the fill panel, and then mounted the fill panel into our broadcast rack. And then, now the next thing we had to do was program the limits on this. So that was easy to do. We went over to the laptop, the representative from ShockWatch, set up the limits, downloaded the limits into a little memory device, and then simply took that memory device over to the G-View and transferred our settings, which included the current date and time, the limits that we wanted to set for the G-force that we wanted to be the minimum G-force that we would want to look at, and temperature limits as well. Now, we deliberately set the G-force really low because we actually wanted this to go off. And then we shipped it out FedEx like we normally do. Now, FedEx handles our equipment perfectly fine. We deliberately set the limits low so that we would see a shock. So we're not bad-mouthing FedEx here in case anybody thinks we are. This would have gone off if we put it in our car, probably. Okay, so then we took it out of the fill panel and brought it to our office, and now that's what we're looking at right here. So the next step, and we can come over to our gauge cam here. The next step now is to transfer the data out of the ShockWatch into my little memory device here, and I'll do that simply by holding this to the G-View. There we go there. And I get a little red light, okay, transfers the data. Now I'm gonna go over to my screen share here and open up the G-View software. And let me zoom into this so that you guys can actually see the tiny print that we've got here. Oh, hold on one second while I zoom. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to see a thing I'm talking about. Okay, there we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click my... Oh, I'm sorry. Left out one step. Come back to the gauge cam here. This is a little dongle that's attached to my computer via USB. I put the memory device in there. Now I'm ready to download the data from this memory device that already sucked the data out of the G-View, and now we're going to download it into the laptop, come back to our screen share. I click my I button, and I click download, and I don't need to leave a note. I'll just say OK, overwrite it, yes, overwrite it. OK. Now the data has been downloaded into my ShockWatch software. And we can see, center this on the screen, you can see on the left-hand side, there's several timestamps. That is when either temperature or shock exceeded our limits. Now, we set the temperature limits really high, so we never got a temperature alarm, but we did get several shock alarms. You can see right at the very beginning, we have a 17G shock in the Z-axis, and then we had a couple of shocks in the X and Z axis. Now you say, well, why is this important? Why do I care? What can I do with this? Well, let's go back and let's look at, first of all, let's look at this 414, April 14th at just after midnight, about quarter after midnight on the 14th, where we exhibited a really high shock, 27 Gs in the Z-axis, 16 Gs in the X-axis. I'm going to now pull up my tracking information from FedEx. Now remember, this was deliberately set so that they would go off. So again, I'm not bad-mouthing FedEx here. But what can we see? If we look at our FedEx tracking, we can see that on April 14th, it arrived at a FedEx location in Wellington, Connecticut at 12:29 a.m. So 12:29 a.m. and our G-View software showed us that it experienced a heavy shock at 12:16. My guess is what happened is it arrived at FedEx. It was being unloaded from the truck. That's typically loading and unloading is where you get these shocks. This is when the stuff is kind of thrown at each other. It's kind of jammed into the truck. This is where stuff impacts each other, right? And that's probably where it was taken off the truck, brought down, put onto the concrete before its arrival scan was done. So that's why these two times really line up. And by the way, I see the same thing when it arrived in Sacramento. So this kind of makes sense. We know that when it's being shipped, it's in the truck, it's pretty safe. These are all air ride trucks and stuff.
Sure.
Probably nothing going on there. It's when it reaches the distribution centers, that is when there's the chance that something might be dropped or a lot of impact can happen. Now, here's what was really cool. I sent this information back to the folks at ShockWatch and said, so give me a little interpretation. Now they did give me actually quite a bit of interpretation, but let's go to a slide here. They gave me actually interesting little bit of information. This is part of the analysis. This is part of something that ShockWatch would do for anybody. They wrote here, during loading, it appears the case was slammed up against other products with the primary force in the z-axis and the secondary force in the x-axis. In this instance, the case...
Zoom out, by the way, Dirk.
What's that?
Zoom
oh,
out.
I'm sorry. I'm all zoomed in there, aren't I? Sorry about that, folks.
Let folks read it. I'm
sorry
about to bust up on you, but I wanted to make sure people could read that.
Hold on one second. Let me zoom out so you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, there we go. Go back.
Much better. A little bit better.
Into our slide here. Hold on one second. And we'll go back into our slide. Yeah, because this slide is actually, this explanation is actually pretty important. During loading, appears the case was slammed up against other products with the primary force in the z-axis, secondary force in the x-axis. In this instance, the case could have been forced up against other products on its wheels, or if it was laid down, which we know does happen, on its side, it was dropped hard while being pushed up against other items. During unloading, the forces were primarily in the y-axis and secondary forces in the z-axis. Again, if it were on its wheels, the primary y-axis would have been a drop. So the thing that's really cool about this particular product is you do get this timestamp. Now, if you have to go back to the freight organization, you've got some proof. If there was any damage, for instance, if the thing had been damaged, I could have gone back to FedEx and said, look guys, we have this monitoring thing on there. You can tell from this exactly where this thing was when it got damaged. It wasn't damaged on our loading dock, wasn't damaged when we rolled it into the office, it was damaged at a distribution center. Okay, so there is actually another device similar to this, which not only gives you a timestamp, it has a built-in GPS.
Oh, interesting.
So you can actually monitor, well, number one, you can monitor in real time what's going on, but even if you are looking just at alarms, you know exactly where it was when the timestamp occurred. So really interesting stuff. And this is, when it comes to freight, I mean, all of us, particularly a lot of our large manufacturers, they ship really large pieces of equipment.
Absolutely.
Heavy medical devices like a CT scanner or MRI unit, or folks who send, maybe some of our advertisers who ship CMMs.
Sure.
They're shipped via truck,
wherever,
trade shows or whatever. This just gives you a really good way to monitor what's going on. So interesting product. That's the G-View from ShockWatch.
From ShockWatch. Yes, great stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's actually interesting to be able to see what happened to our own equipment.
That's right, and have a case study that we ourselves could do.
And be able to align it. I mean, to me what was fun is being able to look, you can see these excessive, they weren't really excessive, but these excessive shocks happened in, guess where? The distribution center. Makes perfect sense.
Sure, makes perfect sense. Great, good stuff. Well, thank you, Dirk, and thank you, ShockWatch, for helping us with that. And we encourage you all out there with interesting applications. Send it along to us, either hardware or software. We'll get it onto the show, onto our Tech Corner segment. Okay, well, that's our show. Before we close, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Hexagon Metrology. Stay one step ahead of the changing world. Hexagon Metrology is the largest player in dimensional metrology, and they're committed to tailoring a solution to fit your needs. But they're not just about quality equipment. Hexagon's service and support team is there when you need them, guaranteeing that they're more than a supplier, they're your partner. Please take a moment to visit www.hexmet.us/QD312D to learn more, and there's a banner ad right there, or kind of right down there if you're watching this on demand later in the week.
Yeah, and we also want to remind everyone out there that all of us at QDL will be attending Hexagon's 2012 conference early next month in Las Vegas.
Vegas, baby.
That's right. we'll leave there and you'll never know. We're covering this unique event top to bottom, and we'll be broadcasting a special episode of Quality Digest Live on Wednesday, June 6th. Keep your eye on your email inbox. More information will be coming to you pretty soon.
That's right. So check that out. You'll be getting information about that, how to register for the event and how to check us out there live.
And I'll try not to wear like a party hat and, you know.
Oh, do it.
Yeah, totally.
That's cool. That'd be great. We're in Vegas.
We're in Vegas, yeah.
What the
Who's
heck?
gonna know?
You know, yeah. You could take your break from your Chippendale side job and you can come out and you can be on the set.
Yeah.
So if you're going to be there, come out and see us. Well, before we close, though, I wanted to mention one other thing. Today, Dirk, as you may know, as all of you know, all of our fans or thousands of fans out there know, this is our first anniversary show.
Yep.
We have
a bunch of these.
We've done a bunch of these. We began doing the show in late April of 2011. So this is really officially our first anniversary show, May 4th. So thank you all for being there. Dirk, thank you. I've got a little surprise for you right here, Dirk, to celebrate our first anniversary.
Cool.
Right there. You know, we can have this because I know how much you like.
And I will say that, you know, we have seen our audience has really, I think about quadrupled since.
That's right.
Since we did this.
So we want to thank our
So we want to thank all four of you now
and
for
for watching this. So Dirk, happy anniversary.
Right, okay.
We'll feed that to each other later. Thank you all.
Awesome.
Thank you all for being with us for this last year. We had a lot of fun, and we look forward to a lot more great shows coming up. So
that's right.
Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you next week here on QDL.
So long.
Bye.
Thank you.